Pendulum Monsters and Pendulum Summoning are a unique part of Yu-Gi-Oh's game design not shared by any other games. They demand players to rethink the fundamental mechanics such as the extra deck, graveyard, and spell cards and how they work, and because of this, have a bad reputation for confusing new players. Today we'll be explaining some of the worst Pendulum Monsters in the game, as well as what makes them so bad. And bowing in at number 10, we have Performapal Smile Sorcerer. This monster is a level 8 spellcaster with a pendulum scale of 1, and the effect of the pendulum scale, where, if a monster you control with a higher attack than its original attack is destroyed by battle or card effect, it can special summon itself from the pendulum zone as a hard once per turn. Then, as a monster, it has the effect where if it's normal or special summoned, you can add one Smile spell or trap card from your deck to your hand. It also has a second effect with a hard once per turn, where if all monsters you control are Performapal, Odd Eyes, or Magician Pendulum monsters, and Performapal Smile Sorcerer's attack is higher than its original attack, you can draw cards equal to the number of monsters you control with the current attack higher than their original attack. However, you cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn after you use this effect. Now, while at first glance, Performapal Smile Sorcerer might not seem like that bad of a card, the gaping cracks in this performer show appear upon any amount of closer inspection. However, to understand the first part of what makes Pendulum Smile Sorcerer so bad, you need to understand how Pendulum Scales and Pendulum Summoning as a mechanic work. Pendulum Summoning is a simple type of special summon enabled by unique mechanics of the Pendulum Monsters, and any monster that doesn't have a restriction on how they are summoned can be Pendulum Summoned from the hand. While technically not always true, a good rule of thumb is that if you can special summon a monster with Monster Reborn, that monster can also be Pendulum Summoned. All Pendulum Monsters have a Pendulum Scale with a number between 0 and 13, indicated by the small boxes with pendulum markers on each side of the card. By placing two Pendulum Monsters, one with a high numbered scale and one with a low numbered scale, into the spell and trap card zones marked with the pendulum markers, you can conduct a once per turn pendulum summon of any amount of generically special summoned monsters with a level between the two pendulum scales from your hand to your field. In addition to face up pendulum monsters in your extra deck to any of your extra monster zones or a zone that a linked monster is pointing to. While being part of the Performapal archetype is a great place to be as a pendulum monster, Small Sorcerer's place in the pendulum scale is already occupied by Performapal Monkey Board as the premier low scale of choice. In addition to this, being a level 8 monster prevents it from being pendulum summoned with some of the best high scales in the Performapal archetype, often leaving it stuck as a dead card in hand. However, this doesn't prevent you from pendulum summoning monsters to tribute summon Performapal Smile Sorcerer afterwards, or attempting to use its pendulum effect to special summon itself. After all, pendulum decks often have ways to destroy their own cards in order to gain access to their powerful effects. However, no matter the method you use to get Smile Sorcerer on the field to activate its effect to search, the moment you do so, this Performapal's act immediately falls apart. Out of the available Smile cards that Smile Sorcerer can search, there are 3 spell cards and 1 trap card. 2 of these spells, Smile Action and Smile Universe, provide mediocre recovery effects combined with some of the harshest restrictions in the game. Smile World gives all monsters on the field, both yours and your opponent's, bonus attack points, and Smile Potion is a trap card that, on a hard once per turn, if your opponent controls a monster whose current attack is higher than its original attack, and you control no monsters, it allows you to draw 2 cards. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. These cards are awful, and demonstrate that a searcher is only as good as the cards it can search. In most cases, the Smile spell traps are completely worthless and leave you wide open to lose the game if you try to use them. However, that being said, Performapal Smile Sorcerer has the potential to be a good card overnight if a broken Smile card is ever printed, leaving it at only number 10 on this list. And cackling at number 9 is Zany Zebra. This card is a level 2 Dark Beast with a pendulum scale of 7, and if Zany Zebra was activated in the pendulum scale this turn, you can choose and lock one of your opponent's unused zones as long as Zany Zebra remains in the pendulum zone. When normal or special summon, this card does effectively the same thing as its pendulum effect, locking an opponent's zone so long as it remains face up on the field. And as I'm sure pendulum players can attest, having even a single pendulum zone blocked off by a zone locking effect can be absolutely devastating. Due to this, it's likely that Zany Zebra was made to be an anti-pendulum card that could be used to lock an opponent's pendulum skill in a pendulum mirror match, a very strong effect in this context combined with its respectively high scale of 7. However, the likelihood of finding yourself in a pendulum mirror match in modern Yu-Gi-Oh! Is almost as rare as finding a shiny Pokemon. That being very, very rare. While zone locking is arguably the easiest and best way to floodgate pendulum strategies out of the game, it's rarely a good effect against non-pendulum decks, and considered extremely bad for the health of the game when it is. Kashtira Shangri-Ra and number 89 Diabolus the Mind Hacker are the golden standard for zone locking. With one of the many reasons for Diabolus getting a ban is its ability to enable Shangri-Ra to FTK by locking up to 9 of your opponent's zones before their first turn. In contrast, Zany Zebra finds itself closer to cards such as Ground Collapse and Ojama King than Shangri-Ra in effectiveness. While it's technically a searchable floodgate that could be useful in the mirror, only locking a single zone is nothing compared to other anti-pendulum tech cards that are available. While Zany Zebra might find a brief moment in the spotlight if a pendulum deck that folds to it ever reaches the status of meta threat, for now it remains as one of the lesser pendulum monsters in the game. And at number 8, we have Dark Doriado. This is a level 4 Dark Spellcaster with a Pendulum scale of 5, and is a retrain of the old ritual monster Elemental Mistress Doriado. In the Pendulum scale, Dark Doriado supports your water, earth, wind, and fire monsters by giving them 200 attack and defense for each unique attribute amongst the monsters you control. Alternatively, if Dark Doriado is normal or special summoned, you can take 4 monsters from your deck, one each of water, earth, wind, and fire, and place them on top of your deck in any order. While Dark Doriado seems like it should be a ridiculous combo piece that seemingly reads search your deck for 4 monsters, so long as you draw the next 4 cards of your deck, it's the second part of the combo where you'd start to get into trouble. The only way to effectively get these monsters into your hand is to draw the cards. However, you have to be careful not to mess up the top of your deck after using Dark Doriado's effect, or else you're effectively left with a level 4 beater and no payoff. While there certainly are deep draw tools available that fit the bill, everything hinges on finding Dark Doriado while not drawing too many of the monsters that you want to search with its effect. If, for any reason, you run out of monsters in your deck with one of the attributes listed on Doriado before committing to a summon, you're left completely ham-boned and unable to activate Doriado's effect. You see, Dark Doriado's effect reads that you can choose 4 monsters, not you can choose up to 4 monsters. This small distinction means that Doriado's effect to stack your deck requires you to have a target for each element available in order to use it. And if any one of those attributes is unavailable, you cannot use Doriado's effect. This is the primary reason Dark Doriado is so bad, despite looking so good. While you technically can do flashy combos that draw you multiple key cards from your deck, this kind of game plan is inconsistent and entirely reliant on random factors like your starting hand that are out of the player's control. In a cruel twist of irony, Dark Doriado can turn even the best combo starters into the hardest of gardens, resulting in its spot on this list. And at number 7, we have PM Captor. This is a level 4 Dark Zombie monster with a scale of 5, and has the Pendulum effect to give any zombie monsters you Pendulum summon protection from card effect and battle destruction for the rest of the turn. Also, when PM Captor destroys a monster by battle, you can target any Pendulum monster in your graveyard and add it to your hand. PM Captor stands alone as the only zombie-type Pendulum monster in the game, and perhaps for good reason. An important detail about Pendulum monsters is that whenever they would move from the field to the graveyard, they are instead sent to the extra deck face up. While these face-up pendulums can be special summoned from the extra deck to the extra monster zone, or any link zones whenever you would conduct a pendulum summon, the concept of pendulum summoning from the extra deck directly conflicts with the identity of the zombie type, which focuses almost explicitly around special summoning monsters from the graveyard. Due to these two conflicting designs, PM Captor faces a bit of an identity crisis. Since no other zombie pendulum monsters exist, PM Captor's pendulum effect to grant your pendulum summoned zombie monsters protection is extremely unlikely to ever come up. Zombies just don't play pendulum monsters. On the flip side, PM Captor's effect to remove a monster from the graveyard might actually be good in zombie decks if it targets a zombie instead of a pendulum monster. While zombies would appreciate the ability to add any zombie from the graveyard to their hand, even as a battle trick, pendulum decks find it completely useless, since pendulum monsters don't typically go to the graveyard. While pendulums can be sent to the graveyard if they go there from any other location besides the field, if a pendulum deck deliberately sends a monster to the graveyard, it's likely that they either already have an in-engine method planned to recover it, or can generate enough advantage regardless to completely ignore it. Either way, this leaves PM Captor a rather worthless card deserving a mention on this list. And sneaking into number 6 spot is Twilight Ninja Kagen. This is a level 1 warrior with a scale of 10, and while Twilight Ninja Kagen is in your pendulum scale, it has an effect which cannot be negated that prevents you from pendulum summoning non-ninja monsters. In addition to this, as a once per turn while Kagen is a scale, you can give one of your ninja monsters attacking 1000 attack until the end of the damage step. Lastly, as a monster, Twilight Ninja Kagen can tribute itself to target a ninja monster you control to give it 800 attack for the rest of the turn. When designing pendulum archetypes, Konami always has to be careful to consider the ramifications of giving pendulum deck access to good, generic pendulum monsters. The ability to special summon nearly any monster from the hand for free using a pendulum summon combined with the recursion ability of pendulum monsters being able to resummon from the face-up extra deck is unmistakably powerful. So typically, strong pendulum monsters come with some kind of restriction that prevents them from being used in other archetypes or looped repeatedly. The most popular restriction to limit the power of pendulum monsters is to archetypal scale lock. This restriction means that while a pendulum monster with one of these locks is scaled, you can only pendulum summon monsters of that monster's archetype. While this lock absolutely makes sense on pendulums with good effects, Konami is sometimes a bit overzealous and gives these restrictions to obviously bad cards, completely killing any chance they might have of seeing play. While Twilight Ninja Kagen was likely given this restriction due to its remarkably high scale of 10, its ninja lock reduces it from being situationally useful to completely worthless. However, ninjas were unlikely to play this in-archetype Pendulum monster regardless, since Pendulum Summon also happens to directly conflict with the goals of the ninja archetype. Ninjas are popularly depicted as stealthy tricksters, and this is reflected in Yu-Gi-Oh! By ninja monsters having excellent effects upon being flipped face up, representing the ninja springing out of hiding. This is precisely why Twilight Ninja Kagen is awful support for the archetype. Its utility as a high scale for ninjas is rendered completely useless since you can't Pendulum Summon monsters face down. And when it comes to its other effects, the last thing ninjas need is more battle tricks. Modern ninja decks are more than happy to simply play Geo Control while attacking their opponent directly for 3 turns with the Maizen, and they can easily set this up without needing for a Pendulum Summon, cementing Kagen effectively as an orphaned card without any real home. And waving in at number 5, we have Magician of Hope. This is a level 4 light spellcaster Pendulum Xyz monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense, and is a crossover between the Pendulum Magician and Utopia archetype, essentially functioning as a pendulum version of the original number 39 Utopia. Its pendulum effect is essentially the original Utopia's effect, allowing you to, once per turn, negate an opponent's attack and destroy Magician of Hope in your pendulum scale. In contrast, its monster effect is a hard once per turn that allows you to detach material from itself to special summon a level 7 or lower pendulum monster from your hand. But its effects are negated, and then afterwards you can place Magician of Hope in your pendulum scale, setting up its pendulum effect. The rest of Magician of Hope's effect simply explains that you can still pendulum summon it from your face-up extra deck since, as an Xyz monster, it's technically a rank 4 and not a level 4 monster. Then, if you pendulum summon Magician of Hope, you can target a pendulum monster in your graveyard and attach itself as a material so you can use its effect. While Magician of Hope's concept as a repeatable, pendulum summonable rank 4 monster is undeniably cool, the biggest issue with Magician of Hope is actually in its name. Being a Utopia monster in spirit but not in name prevents it from benefiting from the droves of support Utopia has received as a fan-favorite archetype, and begs the question, why not just play the original number 39 Utopia? In fact, there are so many better rank 4s than Magician of Hope that it's completely hopelessly outclassed by OTK enablers such as number 39 Utopia Double, and the bannably strong Zodiac Trident that's currently available in Master Duel. If Magician of Hope had simply been given a line of text that always treated it as a Utopia card, similar to how number F0 Utopic Draco Future being treated as a Utopic Future card, it might have genuinely been a good card for Pendulum decks considering a small Utopia splash. And haunting me at number 4 is the Ghost of Christmas Dinner itself, Ghost Beef. Ghost Beef is a normal level 7 brick, which, while it doesn't have a monster effect, does have a pendulum effect that allows you to, once per turn, roll a 6-sided die, and increase Ghost Beef's pendulum scale by that number for the rest of the turn. It has a scale of 4, though it could be argued that it effectively has a scale of 5 due to the minimum roll of its pendulum effect being 1, adding up to 5. Ghost Beef is the other half of Mild Turkey, another generic normal pendulum monster that functions as the reverse of Ghost Beef. While the ability to modulate a pendulum scale is good, the way Ghost Beef and Mild Turkey do so is in the worst possible way, that being the gamble of a dice roll. Despite this, Mild Turkey is a much better card for multiple reasons, and a brief comparison puts the issues with Ghost Beef on full display. First, Ghost Beef's scale of 4 leaves it useless compared to Mild Turkey's scale of 7 and your pendulum effects are ever negated, which happens more often than you might think. Then, unlike Ghost Beef, which raises its scale from an awful 4 to an unnecessarily high scale of 10, Mild Turkey starts at a respectable high scale of 7 that has the potential to reduce itself to an absolutely low scale of 1. In most pendulum decks, the highest scale you're likely to regularly need is somewhere between 7 and 9, with anything above that usually overkill. Generic pendulum monsters whose role is to function as a very high or really low scale are dead on arrival, unless they have some other great effect as well to supplement that scale. And even then, that doesn't guarantee that it will see play. The best generic pendulum monsters are ones with decent scales and evergreen effects that will always be useful, such as Archfiend Eccentric having a respectable scale of 7 and the ability to flex between being monster and spell trap removal. An interesting to note about Ghost Beef is that, despite the loads of generic support it has access to as a normal monster, both it and its Turkey counterpart haven't even come close to seeing play, despite being incredibly easy to search. Even in this niche vein of normal pendulum monsters, Ghost Beef has tough competition with cards such as Dragoons and Draconia, and the entire Metalfoes archetype for those generic searches. In the end, Ghost Beef just doesn't do anywhere near enough to make the cut. And startling at number 3 is Frightfur Meister. Meister is a level 8 Dark Fiend with 0 attack and defense and has a pendulum scale of 4. Its pendulum effect allows you to, as a hard once per turn, tribute a level 4 or lower Frightfur, Fluffle, or Edge Imp monster to special summon one Fiend monster with the same level but a different name from your deck. Frightfur Meister also has 2 monster effects, both with hard ones per turns. First, during your main phase you can special summon one level 4 or lower Frightfur, Fluffle, or Edge Imp monster from your deck. But after doing so, you're locked into only special summoning fusion monsters from your extra deck for the rest of the turn. Second, you can tribute 2 or more Fiend monsters from your field to special summon a Frightfur fusion monster from your extra deck, whose levels equal the combined original levels of those monsters. As a card, Frightfur Meister is a confusing combination of a variety of issues. The first of which is its pendulum scale of 4. Typically, Konami will give pendulum monsters with strong effects a scale of 4 as an explicit drawback that prevents you from pendulum summoning level 4 monsters while it's in the pendulum scale. However, similarly to Twilight and Ninja Kagen, the bigger problem in these cases are the cards Frightfur Meister is intended to support: Fluffles, Frightfurs, and Edge Imps. The Fluffle and Edge Imp archetypes comprise of the materials used to make the various Frightfur fusion monsters, and are able to easily access their core engine pieces without the need for high-level pendulum monsters with 0 stats. It doesn't get much better for Frightfur Meister outside of its home archetype either. Despite the fact that Meister works to generically bridge Fluffles and Fiend monsters together, the locks that both Meister and other Fiend monsters impose on the player using it prevent it from being used in this capacity either. While its unique ability to functionally synchro summon a Frightfur fusion monster using Fiends is interesting, Frightfur Meister doesn't provide enough of a payoff for the heavy investment required to use it. And dropping into number 2 is Rain Bozu. This is a level 7 light fairy with 0 attack and defense and a pendulum scale of 8. Rain Bozu's pendulum effect allows you to, once per turn, target a face-up monster you control and have it gain attack equal to the difference between the amount of cards each player's extra deck times 100 until the end of the turn. Its monster effect also looks at the difference between the amount of cards in each extra deck, but in this case, Rain Bozu itself gains attack and defense equal to difference times 200. But it only gains the attack during your turn and only gains defense during your opponent's turn. Then, if Rain Bozu attacks, it's changed the defense position at the end of the battle phase. And lastly, if Rain Bozu is in the monster zone and is destroyed, you can place it in your pendulum zone. Now, attack and defense modifying effects are widely considered to be some of the least useful effects a card can have, while also being the most common effects Konami gives out. Cards with stat modifiers are only seen as useful when they're either already attached to a good effect, or give loads of attack and enable you to OTK. Since Rain Bozu's effect exclusively modifies the stats of your monsters, this puts it in direct competition with staple decay tools like Axis Kotaku, Boroso Dragon, and number 39 Utopia Double that completely obliterate it in both consistency and raw power. However, unlike any other monster in the game, Rain Bozu's stat modifiers scale with the difference between the number of cards in both players' extra decks. While this certainly is unique, it's also awful. Having Rain Bozu's already pitifully small 100 and 200 size stat modifiers tied to a variable that's controlled by your opponent, that being the amount of cards in their extra deck, prevents it from being able to consistently provide any kind of meaningful stat bonus. The only real way to guarantee a useful buff from Rain Bozu is to either play a completely empty extra deck, or exclusively play a handful of engine cards, which is a ridiculously high deck building cost for the payoff of either a 1500 attack buff or a 3000 attack point beat stick. Overall, despite Rain Bozu being horrendous in terms of playability, it's at least an interesting gimmick that could be built around and hypothetically be somewhat useful, unlike the last monster on this list. And puzzling in both card and art design is number 1 at Pazuzule. This is a level 1 Dark Fiend with a scale of 1 that has a pendulum effect where, once per turn, you can target one card in your other pendulum zone, and Pazuzule's scale becomes the level of that pendulum monster until the end of this turn. But you cannot special summon for the rest of the turn afterwards except by pendulum summon. It also has the monster effect where the pendulum summons of your monsters cannot be negated. While at first glance, Pazuzule doesn't appear to be that bad of a card, or at least not any worse than a card like Twilight Ninja Kagen. However, in this case the devil is in the details. As previously mentioned, many pendulum monsters come with some kind of restriction as to what or how you can pendulum summon while that monster is in the pendulum scale. Typically, these self-floodgating effects are continuous effects, which only apply while the card in question is face up on the field. In contrast, the self-floodgate tied to Pazuzule's pendulum effect that prevents you from special summoning for the rest of the turn, except by pendulum summoning, is a lingering effect. This means that after Pazuzule's effect resolves and the floodgate is applied, the only way to get rid of it is to meet its exit condition by ending your turn. While Pazuzule's ability to modulate its skills to potentially very high levels is strong, losing the ability to use the monsters you pendulum summon as combo pieces to go into the massive end boards pendulum decks are known for is devastatingly bad. Then, to make matters worse, Pazuzule's monster effect to prevent your pendulum summons from being negated is reversely problematic in that it's a continuous effect. This means that if you pendulum summon Pazuzule to your field, your opponent can still chain Solemn Judgment to your pendulum summon to negate and destroy all of your pendulum summon monsters. This is because negating a summon happens before any continuous effects those monsters might have can be applied, since by negating the summon, those monsters are considered to have never touched the field. The only way for Pazuzule to protect you from cards like Solemn Judgment and Solemn Strike is for it to have already been on the field before you committed to your pendulum summon. Because of this distinction, this means that you could just instead play any form of back row removal, such as Cosmic Cyclone or Twin Twisters, as opposed to Pazuzule to proactively call out these powerful negates. This results in the same outcome of protecting your pendulum summon while also fulfilling the more general role of outing other various spell traps you might come across that aren't exactly a Solemn card. While some of the cards on this list could situationally be useful or become better with new support, Pazuzule is and always will be outclassed in pretty much every other way by other pendulum monsters and generic staple removal, making it easily one of the worst pendulum monsters of all time. Alright, and that's the list. Are there any other awful pendulum monsters we may have missed? If so, they were probably in our other video about awful pendulum monsters. Or do you have any ideas for future videos just like this one? If so, please let us know down in the comments below.